and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have yet another special guest episode. I had just the most wonderful conversation with Tommy Dussault from the Post Humpday Podcast, which it comes out on Thursdays, hence the name. So Tommy was kind enough to come on my show to talk about his journey through addiction, recovery, loss, and grief. And I rarely put trigger warnings on these episodes. I kind of figure if you're listening to a show about grief, you'll understand that there will be conversations probably on death at some point. But I do want to just kind of specifically say there are some mentions of suicide and suicidal ideations, things like that. So just keep that in the back of your mind if that is something you would prefer not to listen to. But I highly recommend listening to this one. Tommy was just such a beautiful human to open up and share his story so bravely with all of you. And I'm honored to have had that conversation with him. If you would like to see the video of my conversation with Tommy, please join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. All right, I'm going to stop talking and we'll get on to today's episode with Tommy Dussault. Hi, everybody. I have another special guest this week with me. I'm going to be speaking with Tommy Dussault from the Post Humpday Podcast. I was assured it's nothing sexual. Hi, Tommy. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm doing all right. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here today.
Perfect. Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on your platform. So I'm from Texas. I was born and raised here in central North Texas. I really have done a lot of living in a short amount of time. I'm 32, but kind of to get straight to it, I found myself in a place in life very early on where the need for alcohol and drugs really came into my life. I grew up, what anyone would look at as a normal childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet at 14, 15, 16, I'm doing stuff none of my friends are really doing, and leading me into some pretty dark places early on in life. So I grew up playing music, and I'm a singer-songwriter. I used to rodeo. I used to ride bulls.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I worked on ranches, kind of bounced around from Texas, California, Oklahoma, Montana, back to Texas, back to California, back to Texas. I did a lot of bouncing around. So.
Yeah, you've been kind of everywhere. I feel so boring.
So, hey, these days boring is good in my book, but
I wholeheartedly agree. I'm comfortable with my simple life.
There you go. Exactly.
Okay. So at what you said you were around 14, 13 when you started using, did you start with alcohol or like
I started right. Yeah, I started drinking pretty early on, and it was like pretty innocent, here and there. It was I actually remember like one of the first times being drunk was actually before church.
Oh my gosh.
And my buddy and I had kind of like made a deal. It was like, hey, I'm gonna sneak some alcohol, and he was gonna sneak some alcohol, and we were gonna show up and like hang out. Like bizarre, right?
Okay.
But that's where like it was doing things that like probably the normal person wasn't doing, right?
Okay.
So like being a big risk taker, like an adrenaline junkie, like all of that from an early age. But that those little instances led to more and more and more, to where, in high school, I'm drinking before, during, and after school.
Oh,
By the time I was a senior in high school, I was junior year, senior year. It was beyond marijuana. It was
oh
pills
gosh.
and powder cocaine, and
Okay.
just really went down a dark spiral. It started out fun though, right? If it
I
wasn't
would assume so.
if it wasn't a little bit fun or having a good time, I wouldn't have kept doing it early on.
Sure, sure.
And as I got more involved with rodeo and, getting hurt, getting injuries, you go to the doctor. What do they give you?
Yep.
Pain pills.
Hmm.
So I like to address that side of it. Is I'd say, at the end of the day, um, there is a huge epidemic in our country
Yep.
right now, which I won't go down that rabbit hole too much.
Yeah.
But I was I don't call myself a victim of it, right? But the pharmaceutical side of it, I fell under that category
Okay.
as a teenager with prescription
Okay.
pills. But I went to college briefly, and that was a really big turning point. And to kind of jump into a little bit of loss,
Yeah.
my identity in my hometown throughout high school, it took a drastic fall.
Okay.
And so I was looking to escape.
Okay.
So moving out of the state, going to a school that none of my friends around here were going to. That was my first attempt at like a geographic change. And so I was trying to shed something out of my life because I couldn't wrap my head around who I was and who I was becoming. So
Okay.
it was like this clean slate. I'm going to start over. So I tried to lose myself a little bit.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and quickly, um, as any addict will probably tell you, everywhere I went, there I was.
Yeah.
So I was still the problem. I
Hmm.
found the same people, the same stuff, and more. Um,
Yeah.
and so I lasted a year and a half of a semester in college
Uh,
before I realized it was not working out. So to kind of speed up, I moved back home, try to reevaluate stuff with my family. Um, was seeing a psychologist,
okay.
and one day he handed me an envelope, and this was right before the Christmas holidays. Um, said, "Don't open this envelope now, but when you get home, open it, and I want you to look at it, and we'll talk." Um,
Okay. That seems
I had
mysterious.
Right, yeah. So I had never once mentioned drugs or alcohol to him in his office ever.
Okay.
When I got home and opened the envelope, it was a rehab center, a treatment center.
Mm,
Um, and so that's kind of where this whole journey began for me. Was, you know, I had just turned 19 and I was already off to my first treatment center. Um,
wow.
and I'm not gonna bore everybody with my multiple trips to treatment centers, but
Sure.
I went to more than a couple.
Yeah.
I went to several long-term centers.
Looking back to that first psychologist that broached that subject with you, how did you feel at that time about somebody finally saying, "Hey, I think you have a problem," and how do you feel about it now looking back?
At the time, scared out of my mind.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and now, um, he's somebody that I see around town occasionally, and
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
I go shake his hand.
Okay.
I mean, he definitely, that was what needed to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now the blessings, I didn't see it that way at the time. It was not a blessing.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. It's hard when you're in the thick of it to really see what that is. That's why I was kind of curious how you felt at the time versus now, because, you know, I assumed now you probably look back on that with a bit of gratitude, which you clearly do. So,
oh, absolutely. And I
mhm.
think that the one thing that, and I think I've heard you say this on your podcast before, but it really resonated. The timing of that and the I was not ready for to let go of the one thing in my life that seemed to be keeping me put like holding me together. And what I didn't know at the time was that I would be grieving the loss of my best friend or drugs and alcohol.
Ugh,
Um, so it was like the anger stage, the denial side. I mean, it was just back and forth,
yeah.
angry denial. Inside, um, it was all fear
Hmm.
at the end of the day. Like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And when you're 19 and you're going to a treatment center and all your friends are, in college, and everyone's, you know, going out, having a good time, quote unquote, um, it's like your whole identity of everywhere I'm going, anything I'm doing, like that's in the equation. And so it was yeah, there was a lot of emotion there. Whereas present day, I've been clean and sober, coming up on 7 years in November. So uh, I it's night and day, but it took
Yeah.
a lot of years in between
Sure.
to
Do
get
you
there.
do you grieve the loss of that time ever?
I do. I do.
Okay.
Um,
I would expect, but I mean, you never know.
yeah, and I definitely it took me longer than I would have thought to come to terms with even today. Even
Yeah.
today, the way that things played out was really not ideal on
Hmm.
multiple fronts, but that time that I'll never get back, the friendships, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I am very grateful at the same time because it was kind of the catalyst that had to happen.
Hmm.
Um, so,
Absolutely. That's something I mean, we all have, I would say almost all of us have things in our past we're not proud of or things we've done that were, hurtful. But I know I've had things in my past I'm not proud of either, but I never regret those things because they shaped who I am now. And the same with our griefs. Our griefs shape who we are today. So, of course, we would like to have back those things and people we've lost, but they've helped put us where we are now. So there's something to that for sure. Absolutely. So fast forward a little bit, your first treatment obviously didn't work. You said we're in and out of multiple treatments. What was it like when you finally had that moment? Your first day, you told me what your first day of true sobriety was.
you mean as far as like what changed this time around,
Yeah,
or
like what was it? What was it? Was there an epiphany or was there a moment where it was just like, this is it. I'm ready.
yeah, um, yeah, definitely here's the thing
Okay.
is it would be naive of me to say treatment didn't work. I didn't work.
Right.
I didn't work the program, so like everyone has a bottom and mine got so low that there was I had crossed off a lot of things off that list of my bottom ultimately consequences were never going to be my bottom.
Okay.
I remember being in a group therapy treatment center session with my family, a bunch of other people, their families. And at the time, and this was years ago, I remember my dad, they were doing a group on enabling. Um,
Mm.
I remember my dad asking, well, what happens when my son doesn't care if he doesn't have, a place to stay? He doesn't care. Like, what do and like, there was these moments, and that day was one of them where it really just, I mean, made me sick inside. It really, to my core, like, that could have been enough for me to say, okay,
Yeah.
I've gotta, but I kept digging and digging and digging.
Mhm.
And where it got to change that, was I no longer had an answer. I no longer had a better idea. I no longer had the drive to really keep living. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to die. I was in
Mhm.
this weird jumping off place, right?
Okay.
No hope for a better tomorrow. And was kind of so beat down mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Um, and what that looked like for me was, I had multiple friends pass away in a short amount of time.
Oh, wow.
And just for context, if you're in recovery, you already know this, but death and recovery go hand in hand. Addiction, recovery, death. So I stopped counting about 4 or 5 years ago because it was just like, I, I truly have lost so many people. And I don't just mean people that I saw on the street one time, people that I've bunked with, I've lived with, been in, halfway houses, sober livings, treatment centers, friends, etc. But this last time I had lost three of my best
Oh
friends,
my gosh.
within just over a month. Um,
Ugh.
and it put me in a place where I was actually, I was in and out of sobriety at the time, and I went on what they call a run. I relapsed, found myself in grimy motels with strangers once again, um, running out of money once again. And I'll spare the details, but um, it took a couple ER visits within 72 hours in a psych ward for about a week. So those three occurrences back to back to back, um, and sitting in that psych ward, eating Crustables, drinking apple juice, with no detox medication,
Oh no.
um, coming off of heroin, methamphetamine, crack cocaine, and alcohol.
Oh my God.
Um, and all I had was anti-seizure medication. So, kicking all that, sitting in a psych ward, so sick I could barely get out of bed for five
Yeah.
days, six
Yeah.
days. So, um, when you're in that position, the treatment centers were calling. My family was having them call
Mhm.
me. Will you take help? Will you accept help? It was
Yeah.
no, 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 no. And I wish I could say this wasn't the reality, but the reality was, I don't even remember saying this, but my parents came to visit me, and they were asking me about if I would go try this thing again. And
Mhm.
this is after years of trying and what seemed to be just utter failures every time,
Ah.
no matter my best efforts, right?
Mhm.
And I guess I said, if you'll show up with an energy drink and a pack of cigarettes, I'll go.
Oh man.
Like, I was that desperate just for a little bit of nicotine and
Yeah.
so, and so there I went. And in the back of my mind the whole time was, I know how this ends. I'm not going to
Mhm.
stay sober. and I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but
Mhm.
and I am very, very, very glad that things went an entirely different
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So you said you lost three friends back to back to back in a very short period of time. Do Obviously that impacted you and that's impacted where you are now, but do you feel like you really experienced it at the time, or was it down the line after you spent some time sober that it really hit you?
That's a very good question, because at the time I would have told you it was then.
Mhm.
Um, and what I mean by that is, one of my friends that died, I knew his favorite beer. And so the last alcohol I ever consumed was that brand of beer. Like
Okay.
weird things that most people are like, okay. But I'm like, no, it was like it meant something to me to like
Hmm.
in a weird way, like it was like I was honoring that or something, right? It
Gotcha.
was like so I wanted to, I don't know, um honor, grieve, all of that. It
Hmm.
it was not at the time though. I was in such a spiral
Yeah.
that it wasn't until much later on. And I'll tell you, for one of those, it was only a couple years ago. And that was over 6 years ago
Hmm.
that I fully, um, I would say I really made it through the loop
Yeah.
of that process.
Okay. Wow. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's been a journey with that, and I would say, to this day I still lose people that I've worked with, or I really,
Mhm.
they just will always have a special place with me. But it looks different, and how I honor that
Yeah.
today is I don't honor that in a negative way or a hurtful way of, my sobriety. Now it looks like, um, I do the right thing. I help others. It's a whole different way of healing and honoring that
Yeah.
versus paying homage to, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. So what did your healing journey look like for yourself, as of, a few days into sobriety? Like what was your healing process just for you and yourself?
yeah. There's been multiple experiences with that, but we'll go with the this last period. I found myself out in the hill country of Texas, with a very, very shattered spirit, very broken person who had experienced so much loss that I really didn't care to form relationships. I didn't care to really do much at all.
Yeah.
Just existing. And I think that the first few days of um, that healing journey that started for me this last time, um, it looked like guys I didn't know, bringing me a trash can, um, guys I didn't know making sure I got food,
Hmm.
guys I didn't know giving me a hug like that. It was the spirit and the compassion of others with that common bond.
Yeah.
The like, hey, I've been there too. Like, and I will say I landed at a place that at the time was some of the worst of the worst. Like this was probably the last try for a lot of the people in this treatment center.
Yeah. Mm.
Pretty much all IV users.
Gotcha.
It was chronic relapsers. It was a different experience. Now I will never forget the first bit of hope that came along. Um, and it didn't come in a way that I would expect because um, it actually came when the next new guy got there and
Okay.
I got to go sit outside on a bench and talk to him.
Okay.
And so it wasn't like somebody presented me like, hey, everything's going to get better. Like that was not going to work, but it came on a day that I got to tell somebody else, like, yeah, I just got here, a little over a week ago and blah, 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 blah. And we're talking, and something inside of me was like, all those little seeds that were planted before started coming back up again. Like, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm helping somebody else right now. And this is, got me out of myself.
That's amazing. That's a lot of the people I speak with in my line of work with either grief or with doula work. A lot of us have gotten here because we've suffered our own losses and had our own struggles with grief and death. And I feel like that when you can learn to, as soon as you realize you felt something and you can share that with somebody else, is when you just it all kind of snaps. So it's kind of reassuring to hear that from that as well.
Yeah.
Um, that's super cool. So um I just lost my train of thought. Hold on. Let me get it
Oh,
back.
you're good.
It was oh, so you mentioned you know, having tried and failed sort of through rehab and being in that situation where you're trying something it's not working because you're not ready, right? What advice would you give to somebody who's in that spot right now, knowing what you know now? Because obviously in the moment it's hard to focus on it's hard to find hope. It's hard to focus on that. It's hard to focus on the good. So what would you tell somebody who is in that position right now to help get them to where you are?
Yeah, I would tell them what I tell everybody I work with is keep moving your feet. You're not going to feel better. It's the action that comes first. Um, and I speak for myself, but I think it's a common trait of a lot of people. And my scenario is very stubborn, very hard headed. I'm a very much so learn the hard way type of person,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like listening to other people.
I'm the same way. I'm very
So,
much the same way.
and I don't think that's exclusive to any demographic. It's like, so the tough, it truly is. I mean, it's the hardest thing in the world to
Mm-hmm.
tell, someone's family, that I can't, I can't make him or her do anything, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you say to someone who doesn't feel like trying, doesn't feel like doing anything? Is, hey, I love you enough to tell you I don't care about your feelings right now,
Right.
because I love you that much and I
Mm-hmm.
care about you that much. And I want to see you make it to the other side of this deal. Is you've got to put some action in
Yeah.
and do the work. And I know that can sound harsh saying I don't care about your feelings. The reality is I do care about your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that I care so much to say that, hey, I there's no immediate relief. And I think if you're out there listening or watching, it's no secret we're very much a society of instant gratification,
Oh yeah.
right? And when you're suffering, and you don't have hope, at least for me, the things I'm doing are trying to fill some type of void or some type of immediate shift in how I feel, think, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a person like I want the pill. Give me the pill and make everything better.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there is no silver bullet of
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, take this pill, everything's gonna be better.
Yeah.
So I know that's very long winded. But um, just to say like, hey, I know what doesn't work
Hmm.
and you know what doesn't work if
Hmm.
you're in this situation right now.
Yeah.
So I would start by asking, are you open to a new solution?
God, that's great. Yeah. There is no easy fix to anything. I mean, that's just how life works. And it's unfortunate, but at it, and it's hard to see the other end of it. Like it's hard to see what you'll be like in 5 years from now. And that's true of addiction, grief, lot, like all of these things, even, health issues. Sometimes it's going to be a long road, but just knowing that you'll get there and then you can look back on all this is huge, but it's so hard to see in the moment.
And
Just,
I'll add to that is, and I would, I'm sure that in your line of work, you probably see this as well. In reference to addiction recovery and that field, the thing for me was like the person walking in that had 20 years sober who told me about their, you know, huge house and their family and they got all this stuff back did nothing,
mhm,
nothing for me. I can't connect to that.
mm-mm,
But the guy that had a month sober in front of me that told me he's not like physically sick anymore and he actually doesn't hate his job and like, it's like those smaller increments
yeah.
of that's where I connected the
Hmm.
most initially. Um, was, a guy who had been a paramedic and, all kinds of things that, you know, notable jobs, careers, walking in and saying, hey, my family is tired of me being sober for 2 years. My family's tired of me relapse. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted a badass life, and here's what I did.
Hmm.
Like, I can get down with that. I can listen to that because that's how I felt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a huge piece of that too. Is
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. So, one thing I talk to clients about is honoring what can you do to honor somebody or something you've lost, right? So, what can you or are you doing right now to honor the loss of what you could have been and the loss of yourself?
wow. Yeah, that's a
And if you don't have an answer, that's okay.
yeah, I'd say
It's
yeah.
it's something you can think about, but if you do have an answer, I'd be very interested.
I'll say this. I think the way that I honor who I or what I was trying to accomplish and who I, um thought I would be maybe. Um it's like, hey, like for example with music, I burnt a lot of things down around me. But I was able to, make some amends. I was able to rebuild some of that. And like, look, I'm not a household name. I'm not playing huge shows. And I'm not playing as frequently as I used to, but I just, like yesterday, for example, um, I went over and helped somebody out. And we wrote songs. We worked on songs, and so writing songs still.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, uh, I've gotten some really cool things out of that I would never ever have expected. And have been able to tap into a whole nother side of myself through that, even though it's not the way I would have wanted or saw, like it looks different.
Hmm.
So that's one thing is like with my passions that I dropped for a long, long time or could never really meet my potential with throughout all of that. And then on the spiritual side of that and the healing side of that is knowing that I the greatest honor I could do for that is continue showing up for myself. Um that's at the end of the day, um, of course, for my family and others,
Yeah.
but knowing that I now have that responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and whether I want to every day or not is showing up. And even if that looks like, you know, expressing that, hey, I'm just not in a great place today, communication with like those little things,
Mm-hmm.
that makes a huge difference, and honoring that so that I don't end up right back where I was, or others
Yeah.
don't have to go through that same pain, maybe.
I think that is a perfect answer. I
All
mean, obviously,
right.
there's no wrong answer to that question, but I think
Yeah.
that is a perfect answer. Oh my gosh. So, okay, well, before we like start to wrap things up, is there anything else you would like to share? Any other stories or thoughts?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, but I do want to say that, um whether you're, you know, have been touched by addiction, someone in your life, yourself, a friend, a coworker, a stranger, I think it is kind of intertwined in this whole deal. And I know that in my grieving process, the tough thing was always, um, when someone's sick and like it's not looking great, doesn't make it any less painful than somebody who you just saw yesterday doing great and you got a phone call the next day saying they overdosed, right? They're
Mhm.
gone.
Yeah.
I don't like to compare any type of loss. It's loss. Um,
Mhm.
but the biggest thing is understand at the end of the day, for me, I had to stop asking so many questions, or being angry at the whys that I'll never know.
Yeah.
Why did so and so who had 17 years sober all of a sudden, one like that took me out of, for me, it's okay to feel that, but it never served very well. And trying to understand, um and I don't know if that's, terrible to say or not, but at the end of the day, being able to find that acceptance of, you know, this is unfortunately what's happened.
Yeah.
Because and that's the tough thing, is everyone
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I think that doesn't sound bad at all. I think that's fantastic advice. And you're right. It's you can question things until you're blue in the face, but is it really going to make the loss not there? Is it
right.
really going to make things easier? And the answer is probably no. Um, especially when unexpected deaths, like you said, and I've dealt with that as well. I've had to talk to people about that when it's like, well, what happened, especially when it comes to suicide. Well, what
Yeah.
happened? I didn't know, and they had no signs, and why could they have done that? And it's like, does it really matter at the end of the day?
Yeah. And I think, um what worked for me was understanding it is a sickness just the
Hmm.
same,
Yeah.
and really coming to terms with that. So I just felt compelled to say that, since we're talking about addiction a little bit,
Yeah.
as I know it's a hard thing sometimes for someone who's maybe not in that world to understand or think it was all a choice,
Yeah.
um, is
Yeah.
understand the powerlessness,
Yeah.
that you feel in that
Hmm.
moment is not much different than where they were at
Yep.
also.
I've been to Al-Anon meetings because I've had people in my life who've been addicts, and it's are the same 12 steps for us, and that first step is admitting you're powerless over alcohol or drugs. And that was a hard one for me. That was because I wasn't the one with
Yeah.
the addiction. So I was like, how am I it took me a while to really fully understand and grasp that one. I won't lie, but
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's
Mm.
it is it takes it is the process.
Yeah.
Um
And I
certainly.
know, like, I kept coming back to that one. I'd get up to step 3 or 4 and be like, I need to go back and revisit number one because I still am just, you know?
Yeah, and I'm not the brightest out there. But it took me a long time to understand that by kind of completing that cycle and working with others, it brought me right back to that first step.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
who
Yeah.
knew?
Yeah. I know it's okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being so open and, you know, like sharing all this with me. I'm just honored to have had you here to share all this. And I hope somebody listening out there can get, get the help they need if they're hearing this, or at least feel a little less alone in their grief and
Absolutely.
loss
Absolutely.
and
And thank you
addiction.
for allowing me and having me on your platform
Absolutely.
to talk
Yeah.
about this because it's not always an easy thing to,
No, no, it's
you
really
know.
not. It's one of those stigmatized things that people don't want to talk about because it's, quote unquote bad. And I hate using bad and good for things like this, but that's just one of those things nobody wants to talk about because it's so stigmatized. And I'm just glad when there's people like us that are open, like, nope, we need to talk about this or it's not going away. So,
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be helping anybody by just continuing to live my little life if I'm
mhm.
not getting out and talking.
Okay.
So appreciate you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. So I have a little tradition at the end of all my episodes where I pull a card from the death deck and
Okay.
I'm going to shuffle it up a little bit here. I'm sure everybody sees this. Pull one at random and then I'll have you answer and then I will answer. Um, okay. This is kind of a weird one, but I like this because I've had this conversation with many people. Would you consider donating your entire body to a body farm where natural decomposition is studied with significant benefits for forensic science?
Wow. Um, I think I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually have a very good friend who filled out all the paperwork already and updated her will, and that's what she's doing. She's having her body donated to the body
Really?
farm. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Tennessee. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, to be honest, I don't know. I would consider it. My current option that I have, it's on my final will, is I like to be composted now that that's a thing.
Right.
I'm such an eco nerd and I want to be as environmentally friendly as I can. But I mean, I've always thought if somebody can benefit from anything, I'm not using my body anymore. So if somebody else
Yeah.
can benefit from it, have at. I don't need
Yeah.
it.
I think that's where I'm at also. Is at the end of the day, if it helps somebody else out or, is even, you know, in the slightest helpful for some other reason,
Yeah.
um, why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, Tommy. Well, now is your chance. Tell everybody about your podcast and where anybody can find you.
Absolutely. So, I am part of the Post Humpday Podcast. So it comes out every Thursday. Don't let the name fool you. It's not super sexual, but it's just kind of hot takes, comedy, sports, movies, music. We all have ADHD, so it's all over the place.
Oh,
But
that's awesome.
it's fun. So we are just at Post Hump Day on all platforms.
Okay.
And we'd love to have you on also.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I would be honored.
perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right, Tommy. Thank you again so much for your time. It was absolutely lovely speaking with you.
I loved it. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right. Another big thank you and shout out to Tommy for coming on my show. And please check out his show, the Hump Day Podcast. I'm sorry, it's Post Hump Day Podcast. Post, not Hump Day Podcast. That might be something very different. And I cannot condone that one because I don't know what it is. Post Hump Day Podcast. I've listened to a few episodes. It's a lot of fun. There is some language, so, keep that in mind. I can't imagine I have a lot of younger listeners, but if I do, maybe keep that in mind. Okay. Again, thank you so much for tuning in this week. And I got to say a huge thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring my episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, 100% online. So, as I'm always saying, you don't have to wear pants to therapy anymore. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just go to their website, answer a few questions about your needs and preferences, and then BetterHelp will match you with a therapist from their network that is just right for you. You can talk to your therapist however is best for you, if it's text, chat, phone call, video call. I know I've got phone anxiety. I know a lot of other people do. You don't have to do this on the phone. You can do chat or text. If you do video call, you might want to wear pants. Or not. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but you can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If for any reason your therapist is not the right fit, you can switch at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you'll get the same professionalism and quality you would expect from your old school traditional in-office therapy, but with a therapist that's custom picked just for you. And there's more scheduling flexibility and a more affordable price. And best yet, you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Nikki the Death Doula. And that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Nikki the Death Doula. Okay, guys, thank you. As always, please follow me on Apple, Spotify, wherever you are. Just click that little follow button. It's not just, I don't get any money for that, but if I get more listeners, maybe I might one day. But that's important for the algorithm so people can find me, so that more people can be impacted by my words like you are today. Please leave me a review, do the little star thing, leave a few words. Again, that's how to get more people to find me. And if you want to support this podcast and everything I do for my clients, please join me over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. You get semi-weekly grief affirmations, early access to the podcast, videos that the general public doesn't get to see, and hopefully I'll start doing some Q&As when I get some more folks over there. You can follow me on all the socials. I'm Nikki the Death Doula. I try to post these. Okay, guys, so I said I had Threads. I got rid of Threads. Oh, I didn't get rid of it, but I'm so fickle. I promise I'm going to be more consistent one day. But as much as I fought it, I have a TikTok now where I'm just putting some snippets up from the podcast and some of the stuff I post on Instagram, because I do a lot of reels over there with some great quality content on stuff you can expect at the end of life. I'm putting it on TikTok now too, because everybody's like, that's the way to find people, Nikki. And I keep fighting it, but whatever. So I'm on TikTok. I'm Nikki the Death Doula there as well. So go find me, follow me, share my videos. I would really appreciate it. If nothing else, you're a wonderful human, and I thank you for listening. All right, guys. As always, just remember, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck.